everyone, I'm Rich Nicumm, Education Services Manager for Preservation Parks, and welcome to spring and to Gallant Woods Preserve. I'm standing out here because these vernal pools come alive in the springtime with all sorts of critters. And today we're going to talk about the frogs and toads that you might find on your visit not only to Gallant Woods Preserve, but other areas around Delaware County. So vernal pools and wetlands are exceptionally important to amphibians like frogs, toads, and salamanders because these are the nurseries for those animals. The word amphibians means dual life. Many amphibians spend their time in the water and on land, and many of them spend their entire life in the water. But at some point in their life cycle, they have to come back to the water to lay their eggs. So these are examples of amphibian eggs. In particular, these are salamander eggs. But frog and toad eggs are very similar. When the frogs and toads come to the vernal pools or wetlands in the springtime, they are calling, like you can hear in the background here, the chorus frogs that are in the background, and they're looking for a mate. And once they find those mates, they will lay eggs, fertilize those eggs, and then you will find their remains as these jelly-filled egg masses throughout the wetlands. And in this particular egg mass, I can actually see the larvae starting to develop. So this is kind of exciting in that we can see the very starts of those little salamanders here in my hand. So the frogs and toads come to the wetlands and vernal pools in the springtime. They find a mate, they lay eggs, fertilize those eggs, and then they go off. They don't take care of their young like birds and mammals do. So once those young hatch out of those eggs, those tiny little amphibians are then left to fend for themselves, searching for food, fighting off predators, and many of them do not survive because they are so tiny. Many animals prey upon them. They're good food for other animals. And so when you walk by a vernal pool or a wetland, you may see these large egg masses and think to yourself that there's going to be a large amount of those little guys out there in the world. But in reality, many of them do not survive, which is why these frogs and toads lay so many eggs at one time, so that they're always going to guarantee that some of their species is going to survive. So the word that we give to this whole process is metamorphosis, which means a change of life. So when the adults come to the wetlands to lay their eggs and leave, they leave the larvae developing in those eggs. Those larvae eventually develop into tadpoles. Those tadpoles, over a period of time, eventually develop into adults as well. Then they go off into the woods or into other parts of the pond or the vernal pool or wetlands, and the whole cycle starts all over again the following spring.
So spring peepers are one of the first frogs that you will hear out and about in the springtime. They are a thumbnail-sized frog with a characteristic X on their backs. They are a tree frog and have the characteristic toe pads on their feet. And if you don't see them in the springtime in the wetlands, it can be difficult to see the rest of the year as they move out of the wetlands after breeding season to the woods and hang out in the trees and bushes, blending in so well that you walk by them and don't even know it. The chorus frog, another common frog seen in the early spring. It's often confused with the spring peeper because it is similar in size, about the size of your thumbnail, but is very different in color. It can be kind of characteristically look like a toad with similar markings, but is not covered with all of the bumps that you might find on the toad. It has a black mask that kind of goes through its eyes, and then 3 distinctive dark stripes on the back extending from the nose, across the eyes, and on along the length of the body. The call of the chorus frog is one of the most recognizable in the springtime as well, as it sounds like you are rubbing your fingers across a comb. This call can be heard throughout the parks and other areas here in Central Ohio in the early spring. So American toads are one of the most common frogs or toads that you will see in the springtime here in Ohio. They can be found from your backyard to the woods. In the spring, they congregate in large numbers in our wetlands and ponds, laying thousands upon thousands of eggs. They are easily recognized by the trilling call that they make that can be heard throughout parks and even in your backyard in the early spring. They are also easily recognized. They are about 2 to 3.5 inches in size, and they are covered with little tiny bumps that many people think are warts. but these bumps help them camouflage themselves with the materials in the woods and prairies, and they can also be recognized by the two big bumps right behind their eyes. These two big bumps are glands that actually secrete a chemical that makes them taste bad. So when a predator picks them up and has them in their mouth, they get a taste of this chemical, and it will cause them, hopefully, to spit the toad out. And it offers them an additional form of protection. In the springtime, after the tadpoles have turned into adults, you can walk down the trails here at Gallant Woods Preserve or other parks and see little tiny toadlets by the hundreds hopping along the trails.